Welcome. It's a great pleasure to have you with us today. Let's not be afraid of adjectives. It's a huge pleasure. Please put on your masks during the press conference. Welcome to you all. I am going to jog people's memories because obviously everyone is extremely well known. Paul Verhoeven is in the middle of the table. Paul, who made Elle in 2016, which was an international triumph. Basic Instinct, Black Book, we all love these movies. Virginie Efira, a triumph in many films, and she was a young Catholic in Elle as well. And she has become Sister Benedetta, a saint and a lesbian at the same time. Daphne Patakia, hello, Daphne. We saw you in Versailles on Canal+. We're very pleased to welcome you here for this wonderful film. And just next to me, we have Olivier Rabourdin, who's, of course, acted in many films, who's come to Cannes time and again. Louise Chevillotte. Hello, Louise. You were discovered in Synonyms, and this year you're in competition in Benedetta. It's a very eclectic career you have as an actress. And also we have Clotilde Corot, who we saw in The Shadow of Women, L'ombre des femmes. And I know that Olivier and Clotilde are in a TV series called The L'Absente. Saïd Ben Saïd, the faithful producer of Paul Verhoeven since Elle, and he'll talk to us about the project. David Burke, who is the co-screenwriter for the film, and that was the case for Elle. So thank you for being here. I'll put the first question to Paul Verhoeven, of course. I'll try and go quickly to give the floor to the room. Dear Paul, Benedetta has been adapted from a book, not a novel. It's called Sister Benedetta, Between Saint and Lesbian, published by Judith C. Brown. It's not a novel. It's a very historic reconstitution of the story of Sister Benedetta. The film seems to have been made for you. All your topics are in it, all the topics of your previous films. So why did you decide to adapt this novel or this book? And how did the work go on that basis?
Well, somebody gave this book to me, a Dutch scriptwriter, in fact, and that I worked with a lot, and thought that it was a movie. So I read it, and I was so surprised what happened in the 17th century, in 1625, in the city of Pescia in Italy, between two women, two nuns in the Theatine convent. In an atmosphere of religion at that time, which would be the Roman Catholic religion, it would be unheard of that two women would have a relationship, a sexual relationship. In fact, most men would say this is impossible. In fact, that's also a line in the movie. And a woman can never be attracted to a woman. Of course, it was expressing at that time that something that, like lesbianism, which word did not exist even at that time, was absolutely forbidden or just could not happen. And I think that was so intriguing if we see what happened in 1625, how people, our people, the Western European people, how they were thinking about a lesbian love story, and where we are now, isn't it? I mean, we are probably not completely there, but I think we have made a lot of progress. And I thought the differences between then and now was also a reason to do the movie. I thought it would be interesting to tell people this is how we looked at life at that period. So and then, of course, it was a really interesting story because she went to trial, of course. She was accused of having a sexual lesbian relationship. So I think there was a plot, kind of, a certain narrative. Of course, the book is an academic book with hundreds of notes in the back, but it's not a really novel. It's not really a narrative. So we brought in the narrative. David Burke did that, and so based on many, many things that you will find in this book, we based the script. So that's why I did it, how I did it, and I think I'm very happy that it was possible, and the whole filming of the movie was extremely pleasant and wonderful and warm on every level. So it was a great production. And thank you again, Said, for getting this on the rails. So that's my position, and that's what I hope you will see in the movie. That's it?
Virginie Benedetta.
Virginie Benedetta. She's a saint. She manipulates people. She's a lesbian, of course. There's no doubt as to that fact. There's a mystery. When you're an actor or an actress and you're going to play that kind of a part, what do? I imagine you have your own thoughts about the character. Is that not the case at all? You worked on the mystery, and does that help you to play the part? Yes, things are very ambiguous. Paul is filming. I'm not going to portray ambiguity. I can't, as a character, say, well, I'm very ambiguous. What was wonderful with Paul, and I really benefited from that, like all actors and all people in the crew, what I enjoyed was the absolute trust he has in others. When I asked how to prepare for the film, I didn't want to base myself just on my own personal experience. For example, the scenes where I'm possessed, he said to me, well, you know what you have to do. So that gives you huge confidence. There's something quite joyful for me. I thought, well, I can do what I think. And it was a very worthwhile experience. I think that also interested Paul. In addition to the ambiguousness, the idea was, well, I liked the idea that she doesn't really lie. I'm not sure that people who really manipulate others are aware that they're sick in a way, they're pathological. When you believe in something strongly, it really exists. She's possessed, but she has this unshakable belief and faith, and it's this beauty, this total conviction she has that stands out. Thank you. Daphne. I talked about the beginning of your career. When you got the script for this film, did you immediately say yes, unreservedly? Yes. Or on the contrary, did you think, oh, well, I'm not quite sure? No. I immediately said yes. Even before I read the script, I was willing because it's Paul. I hadn't seen all his films. I've seen a lot, and I already hugely admired his work. When I read the script, I remember reading it for the first time, and I said to myself, well, there is not a single normal scene. When a scene appeared normal at the beginning, there was always something that was destabilizing, and I thought, this is crazy. So yes, I immediately said yes, and then you weren't afraid of anything. With Paul, no, because everything was very clear right from the beginning. Even in terms of the love scenes, which may be a bit scary with Paul, everything is always incredible. He immediately talked to me, even during the casting when we first met, about these love scenes, so I knew exactly how they were going to be shot. I understood the approach. Virginie, moreover, We get along with each other extremely well. So we weren't afraid of anything. Or maybe there was an initial fear that we didn't know how to go about things right, because Paul doesn't talk a great deal. And so I went to see the press conference of Elle to see whether there were some clues as to how he intended to do his work. Isabelle Huppert, at the time, said, well, I'll try to explain what she said very clearly. She said that it's through the directing and the set that he guides you in your work. I'm explaining what she said rather badly, but I listened to the press conference on Elle to get some information. I also remember that one day I heard Paul saying to someone on the set, shooting is a democratic process. Is it true? Yes, it is. Yes. He asked for everyone's opinions. He gave us great freedom. The artistic process was based on all that. I don't really know how to explain it. Olivier Rabourdin, you're the man in this very closed female atmosphere. Things are very ambiguous. I have the impression that through your character, you give a tragic dimension to this story. It's very theatrical. There's all this passion, betrayal. And I think it's your character that reminds you of traitors, people who were on the sidelines, but they play a mysterious part. And I think that this character really gives the lyric and the poetic and musical dimension to the film. Well, for me, he's a political animal. In other words, quite early on in the film, he clearly announces his intention with Charlotte Rampling. Yes, you're thinking about Assisi and how it is now and how it was in the past. And he does the job. He does the work. He's the political animal. When he has to be a bit solemn, he says, well, you do this, you do that. And he's very professional in what he does. When he wants to create a sort of a show or comment, he says, this is the satanic side of things. And when Benedetta turns up on the set and the spotlight is on her, he says, okay, he waits for the right time. He struggles as he can against the nuncio. He knows that he's more powerful than he is. So he's a purely political animal. And that's how I portrayed the character. As to what Daphne said, indeed, the two ways in which Paul directs is through the screenplay. The screenplay is wonderful for actors in their performance. We know how we have to act in that scene because of the way it is set up and the pace. And then he's such a kind person that gives you confidence. And we know that if we make a mistake, he'll say, well, maybe it would be better to do things in this or that way. And all that really helps you on the set. Louise, an obvious question. Of course, for me, Paul Verhoeven has been a great feminist ever since the beginning, even if there are some bad interpretations, I think, of his films. I'd like to know what your view is as a woman. It's a beautiful film. So is it quite feminist as well, this film? Women are depicted in a complex way. The film is both subversive and sophisticated. Women aren't there just because you have to have some women in the film. What I love in Paul's films is that women are portrayed in all their complexity, and I think that women, that's what they have to really achieve increasingly, and this film is the embodiment of that approach to women. Everyone appears in one way or another to others, and things fall into place as time goes on. What's really important is that she is very obstinate, determined as to her fate, and the emotions are always there. So it's a huge success in this respect. Women are depicted in a complex way. They are both complex and entitled to experience their emotions to the hilt. Now, what about your experience? How is it working with Paul? And what's it like? What's he like as a director? He understands French, even if he doesn't speak it a great deal. Well, why is he pretending not to speak French this morning? Well, maybe that's just the way he is. Clotilde. I agree exactly with what Louise said. Feminism is very much there, thanks to Paul's approach and sensitivity. And there's an animal side to things in the film, and that is part and parcel of the human being in all his or her complexity. Working in a film by Paul, participating in this work is a huge opportunity. In his films, there is no viewpoint. Paul lets each viewer to adopt his or her own viewpoint as to what faith can be, lies, manipulation, working with Paul. Well, he's someone who's very silent. He gives us a storyboard every morning. He is someone who has his own vision. He's quite visionary. Nothing changes. He knows exactly what he has in his mind and what he hears, and we understand what he wants very quickly. He doesn't have to explain things in detail. Saïd Ben Saïd, you have two other films in Cannes this year, Tralala and one other. I haven't seen them both. You said that Benedetta was an experimental blockbuster. Could you explain that? In fact, I said that it was a super production and at the same time an experimental film. It's a film which is really striking, and it's very enigmatic, strange, and mysterious in many aspects. It's surprising. It surprises the spectators who are very divided in their views of the film at the end. It was an eagerly awaited film, and also it destabilizes you. In my view, although of course I can't really stand back much from the film, I believe that there's quite a lot of irony in Paul Verhoeven's films. And this irony is more than just the tone of the film. It's almost a central theme that runs through his work. Irony, like the irony of fate or one's destiny. In my view, Lambert Wilson, when the nuncio says to Benedetta at the end, well, you lied to me from beginning to end. Well, that was an incredible moment. You can construe this in several different ways. And also, Paul gets along well with David Burke, extremely well. The chemistry is there. Things work between the two. David Burke contributes a great deal to Paul Verhoeven's films, and I'd like to pay tribute to him. He's very modest and a hugely talented man. I wanted to put the question to him as well. David, we've been talking about chemistry, mayonnaise in French. you drew inspiration from a very serious plot. It's a political, lyrical, tragical film. There are all sorts of dimensions in it. How did you manage to strike a balance between all these things in the film?
English is okay?
Yeah, of course, no problem.
Yeah, otherwise I could maybe order a Coke or something. Yeah, I think the thing is just to try not to be boring. So my rule of thumb is when one strand is starting to get boring, you find another one to jump to, and then you just kind of like sew them all together, basically. Yeah, so I think just boredom avoidance is like my main aesthetic principle. So also I guess I have ADD or something, so I usually like to kind of jumble tones and things together. And also I was telling Paul, actually, it's interesting because in my youth, my father took me to see Flesh and Blood. We saw Flesh and Blood together. And I remember it just really, excuse me, it just really impressed me because the Rutger Hauer character in the beginning of that, it's like he's like a lovable rogue, or you think like he's going to be some kind of Robin Hood figure. Then he like rapes a woman, and he's like really a bad guy. And you go, oh, okay, so he's the villain, and the other guy who's coming to the rescue is a good guy. But then you go, oh no, that guy's kind of a bad guy too. And actually, Rutger Hauer, I guess he only kind of raped her. So you're always kind of making these constant like kind of amoral calculations. And to me, that kind of amorality and ambiguity is something that I. So if we get along together, it's probably because I saw his movies at an impressionable age and was struck by exactly those things, the mixing of tones and things like that. So I'm just trying to always emulate that, basically.
Thank you so much. Je crois qu'il y a une question. Pardon.
I think we have a question.
Oui, levez-vous, s'il vous plaît.
Stand up, please.
Please stand up.
Good afternoon. Hello? Hi, it's Jason Gorber from thatshelf.com in Canada. Congratulations on the film. It's a masterwork. You bring sedition and salaciousness and philosophy and, above all, entertainment to the Palme d'Or competition, so thank you very much. Paul, the film is about liars and what happens when a greater liar shows up in your midst. I'm wondering if you could tell about some of the lies you have to tell yourself as an artist just to get out of bed in the morning, about what drives your art, what continues at this age to shame younger directors just to bring to screen films of such passion and such energy. And if some of the performers can talk about specific moments on the set where you saw this master maybe very gently guide you through some very dark and very troubling scenes, but did so with a lightness and a humor which he's absolutely known for. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, I believe. It's not that to come back to what was said before, it's not that I don't want to speak in French. It's just, let's say, a movie that's so complicated, and it's because of the different levels of religion, political, church politics, and then, of course, the sexual layer. So to do that in French, I can direct that, sure, because there's a certain amount of words you need for a film that are mostly the words of the script or the words of Judy Brown. So that's all to be done, but to explain in French exactly in a nuanced way what I thought, that is too difficult for me. So I forgot a little bit about the question, but but thank you for that. And for me, what was really important in the movie, I think, was if you ask me what was driving me, was in fact that it was in some way true. That I was making a movie about events that in some way had really happened. And in fact, realize from, let's say, a feminist point of view, that the basis of the film is based on the interrogations of two women. The book of Judith Brown tells you what was said at the trial by the nuns. So, in fact, the testimony that we have comes from two women, from Benedetta and Bartolomea. And I thought that basically that gave me the idea that I was not trying to get into some female thing that I didn't understand. I understood it because the women themselves told me in the book what they were doing, and in a very detailed way. And if you ever read the book, you'll find out that even in a sexual way, Bartolomea told everything what they exactly did in bed. And I thought basically that's a testimony of women, and the book is written by a woman. The camera is done by a female operator. That was not because it had to be a woman, because she was so good, Jeanne Lapart. So I think that gave me the fact that it was true made it so easy, in fact, to make the movie, because I was not inventing, in fact. People think that that it was me that built these scenes, but they are mostly in the book. So I think, I thought it was something that I had not done so precisely ever in my life, and that made it work for me. That was the pleasure of doing it.
Question suivante, jeune homme.
Bonjour, bonjour Martin Lhomme pour le podcast Ex Duquere. Félicitations.
Congratulations on this film. In the film, the word blasphemy arises often. In France, people say blasphemy doesn't exist. One's free to criticize religion and belief. Yet some people live under threat in France. The Charlie Hebdo team and others. And people on the net accuse you of blasphemy. Is this something that you thought about when you wrote the film? And is this something you are thinking about today when the public will be discovering Benedetta in the movie theaters?
But I don't understand really how you can be blasphemous about something that happened. Even if it's in 1625, it was really, it's true, mostly. I mean, of course we changed a little bit, but it is not, so you cannot talk, why would you talk about blasphemy about something that happened 400 or 500 years ago? I think that is really, I think that's wrong. You cannot basically change history après la fin. It's done, you know, people have done that, and you can talk about that was wrong or not, but you cannot change history, you cannot change the things that happened. And I think I base it on the things that happened. So I think the word blasphemy for me in this case is stupid.
Je sais plus où on est. Là, le jeune homme, levez-vous, merci, ça nous aidera. Bonjour.
Kyle Buchanan from the New York Times. This question is for Paul Verhoeven. Mr. Verhoeven, the audience at the press screening applauded the sex scene. In particular, I think the use of the Virgin Mary as a sexual aid. Can you talk about having the nerve to craft a sequence like that?
Oh, you're joking, is it?
No, they applaud it.
I didn't think that there was any special reaction to this. To the scene, basically, that you are referring to. Perhaps you saw that, but I didn't notice that.
At the press screening,
Il y a eu des rires.
Well, yeah, sure, but what do you think is more important?
I might be more partial to the press. He might be more partial to the premiere.
Oh, okay, well, that's anyhow your choice, but I like the audience, you know. So. That sequence, which one is the Holy Virgin? Yes. Well, you saw the movie, isn't it?
I can provide you with a storyboard.
What can I add to basically what's there?
Can give him the storyboard.
Il nous reste peu de temps, donc on va essayer.
We have very little time left. We'll avoid lengthy conversations.
Merci.
This is Yannis Zambourakis from Athens, Greece. Congratulations to the film. I have a question to the two main actresses, Miss Efira and Miss Patakia. It has to do, but it's a general question. It doesn't really have to do with the movie. It has to do with the kind of hysteria and fear that I think the world in cinema has towards cinema nudity these last years. If you ever felt something like this, movie, of course, is an exception. But I think that this kind of nudity is something that belongs to the past, unfortunately. So I would like from you to comment on your thoughts about this hysteria, if you think that there is an hysteria and fear towards those kind of scenes. I hope I made myself clear.
Je peux répondre?
I'll give you an answer.
Moi, je pense que c'est pas une hystérie très française.
I don't think it's particularly true of France, this hysteria. I haven't encountered it much. I don't think that's really the case in France. No. People are interested in sexuality. There aren't that many directors who know how to film it, but Paul Verhoeven, since the very beginning, is someone who has dealt with this major topic in an amazing way. Nudity, well, nudity is of no interest when it's not depicted in a beautiful way. That's not what Paul does. Everything was very joyful when we stripped off our clothes. Daphne, can you confirm that? Yes, everything was very joyful because it said so much. You forget you're naked, that there are these naked bodies. I have the impression that even in Paul's other films, these scenes where people are nude or making love, well, they speak reams. Paul yesterday, who talked about basic instinct, and the sex scene with Sharon Stone, which lasts for a very long time. It's not a love scene. You're just waiting to see when the guy is going to kill her with an ice pick. It's a scene that says something different. It's not just nudity. Of course, there is sensuality, but the scene conveys many more things than just that.
And don't forget, in general, people, when they have sex, they take their clothes off. So I'm stunned, basically, by the fact that we don't want to look at the reality of life.
Wow.
Why this puritanism has been introduced is, in my opinion, wrong.
Bonjour.
Frédéric Rougeau, le Max Cinéma. Je voudrais revenir sur...
I'd like to talk about what was said at the very beginning by Paul Verhoeven. The film also deals with progress. The film is full of irony as well. I'd like to ask you all about the viewpoint, because Mr. Paul Verhoeven doesn't give his viewpoint. What about the people who took part in the film? Is the film supposed to be quite light-hearted, or is it supposed to be a really, really deep film? One doesn't exclude the other, of course. Virginie? Well, in terms of that question, I think the film is very, very deep, given all the questions it raises, which meet to no answer. As soon as I read the screenplay, I realized it was quite metaphysical at times. What I find wonderful and so elegant, that's why directors like Verhoeven are so important. Things aren't taken too seriously. In other words, you have a veil of lightheartedness and just fun in the story while dealing with very deep issues. That kind of film is very rare. You push back all the limits.
Shall you read something from the book?
Voilà.
The investigators of the trial also wanted to know how long these affairs had gone on. For over 2 years, Bartholomew said. How often? At least 3 times a week. 8 to 10 times she disrobed. Up to 20 times she kissed her genitals by force. That's basically what happened then. So I think, which is basically gives you all the information you need basically to know exactly what the film is about. It's about what happened.
Merci beaucoup. La toute dernière question, je suis désolé.
One very last question. I'm so sorry.
Yes, good morning. It's a question for Paul Verhoeven. I'm Jo Korteraat from the Netherlands. I want to ask the fact that the world is getting conservative, more conservative in a way of nudity. How do you think that is coming like that? And is that difficult for the distribution of the film?
Yeah, well, you have to ask that to Saïd Ben Saïd, je crois. It's certainly happening, and I don't think it's better that way, no. So I think what we had in the 70s in Holland in the sexual revolution, I would say, where, let's say, everybody on the beaches was topless, that is completely gone, and I don't think that is an improvement, no. Not for me.
Merci beaucoup, merci.
Thank you very much. Thank you to you all. Thank you, Saïd Ben Saïd, David Burke, Clotilde Corot, Daphne Patakia, Virginie Efira, Paul Verhoeven. Thank you very much to you all. Thank you for your very talented performance, and thank you for being with us here today.
À très vite.